Welcome to the second in our series of workshops on developing the next generation of research leaders for sustainable development. WUN is offering the series in collaboration with the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network and with UNESCO. The workshops are intended to help enlarge the networking opportunities for researchers in the early stages of their careers. An important part of WUN's mission is to nurture research talent, and historically we've done that through a mobility program aimed at early career researchers. That program, along with many of the other means by which researchers typically establish their collaborative networks, has of course been upended by COVID-19. And this series of workshops is a response to that. They're intended to help researchers find peers and potential collaborators who have related interests. But we're not doing the workshops as just a stopgap until life gets back to normal. If they're a success, we will have created a vehicle for enlarging opportunity generally, and especially for researchers whose freedom to collaborate internationally has in the past been limited by financial or other restrictions on travel. The emphasis on the SDGs, each workshop will explore one and the research challenges that go with it, stems from WUN's adoption of sustainable development as the principal research focus of our strategic plan. Later in this session, I'll say more about the particulars of our research agenda and the ways in which you can become involved in it. But first, we'll hear from two distinguished speakers who will characterize some of the rich research challenges and opportunities presented by Goal 13, Climate Action. Now, we'd hoped there might be a little time for questions after their remarks. There may still be. And if you'd like to ask a question as you listen to the presentations, please use the Q&A function. And if there's time, we'll take questions at the end of the presentations. I'd like now to introduce our first speaker, Ovais Sarmad, Assistant Secretary General and Deputy Executive Secretary of the United Nations Climate Change Secretariat, the UNFCCC. Mr. Sarmad advises the Executive Secretary in a range of issues relating to the intergovernmental affairs, UNFCCC, and its strategic planning. He is responsible for operations covering human and financial resources, as well as organizational development. Thank you, Mr. Sarmad.
Peter, thank you very much. And it's a great pleasure for me to join you in this webinar. And on behalf of all of us here in the UN Climate Change Secretariat, located in Bonn, Peter, thank you again, and Mike for organizing this very interesting, very timely webinar. And it's a great honor for me to share this with Professor Dubuche. Given his prominence, he should have perhaps spoken first, but that gives him an opportunity to disagree with me if he so wishes. But to start with, let me just quickly, briefly give you an introduction of who we are and what we do. We in the UN Climate Change Secretariat, we are the organization in the UN system tasked solely to deal with the issue of climate change. And we bring 197 countries, we refer to them as parties, in various fora to come together to discuss, negotiate, and come to agreements in addressing climate change. And all of that is underpinned and based on science, because there's another body you must have all heard about, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, as that is referred to. It's a very important body that provides that insight into our work, which drives our work, that drives our process. And since, as you mentioned, SDGs are also extremely important, we also believe that all the 17 SDGs are interrelated, interconnected, and they all need to advance together. And SDG 13, which is climate action, is central to our work. And we also feel that SDG 13 is one of those that if we don't address that in a very decisive, coordinated, and a concerted manner, it puts a damper on all other SDGs, be it poverty, energy, social inclusion, and other socio-economic impacts of the global community that we all are. But at the same time, the positive side of SDG 13 is if we address that in a progressive, positive, and a constructive manner, it has a multiplier effect on all the other SDGs. So it's extremely important from that point of view. At this stage, also, let me highlight, okay, one of the, as I mentioned, objective of our work is to bring the parties, the governments together to agree on global climate change issues and agree on concrete outcomes. One of which was in 2015, Paris Agreement, as we all have heard about. And from the Paris Agreement, I'd like to read out one specific article, which is very interesting and very relevant to our discussion. And here is the Paris Agreement, and Article 12 of that, which is a very small and non-bureaucratic and non-legalistic paragraph here, and it encapsulates what I call the soul of the Paris Agreement, and it reads as follows: parties shall cooperate in taking measures as appropriate to enhance climate change education, training, public awareness, public participation, and public access to information, recognizing the importance of these steps with respect to enhancing actions under this agreement. So that sort of captures the essence of what we all are trying to do, and especially the educational institutes, the researchers, the scientists around the world. Now, with that as a backdrop, let me reflect on where we are right now. We are unfortunately not where we ought to be in terms of reducing and limiting the carbon emissions, which lead us to a global warming of already more than 1.1 degrees centigrade after the Industrial Revolution. And the goal and target of the Paris Agreement is to limit that to 2 degrees, preferably 1.5 degrees by the end of the century. So in that context, if we look at that, we're already at 1.1 degrees centigrade, above those industrial levels. And to reach the 1.5 degree, we only have until the end of this decade, 2030. So time is running. And even with that 1 degree global warming, we see the impacts of climate change that is devastating many, many parts of the world, everywhere. And there's no rich, poor, middle-income country, nation that is spared the impacts of climate change. So that's what we're dealing with. Unfortunately, that's not. But I always like to remain optimistic and positive about that. We are on the right trajectory in terms of addressing those challenges, in terms of bringing the awareness. And as we have seen, the youth around the world have started mobilizing their voice and making that very clear that it is their future that we're dealing with. And the governments and many institutions around the world, including private sector, is now listening to those voices. So we feel very encouraged about it. But at the same time, we also have been struck with this horrible pandemic last year, and that has also somehow brought about the vulnerabilities of the society that we all are in many different ways. And it has proven that most significant challenge to nations since the Second World War is what we're going through. And to add to that, the climate change, the impacts of climate change, it just makes it very, very dramatic, and also that highlights the urgent need to address it. And with regard to climate change, what we also strongly believe and advocate and say it out loud and clear, that although there is a vaccine for COVID, which we're very fortunate that it has come about in the shortest period of time, although the rollout is still not as what we expect, there can never be a vaccine for climate change. If there was to be a vaccine for climate change, it's climate action, SDG 13, and all what that entails. So we need to make sure that as we come out of the pandemic, we focus on building back better and not going back to bad old days that got us to the situation that we are in. So we have a fantastic opportunity. And this year, that opportunity has become a lot more relevant with the recent outcome of the elections on the other side of the Atlantic. That has given us a lot of hope that the big countries around the world, the biggest emitters, are now showing a lot more commitment, and especially with the re-election or the election outcome of the United States, we see a lot of positive hope in terms of addressing those biggest challenges. So we have China, European Union, Japan, India, all coming together much more now already in a very short period since the start of this year to show higher levels of ambition and commitment to reduce their carbon emissions. Now, also, as I mentioned right at the beginning, science is what underpins our work and the process that we facilitate with the government. So it plays an extremely important role. And its comprehensive assessment reports of the IPCC, they summarize what policymakers widely recognize that the most credible source of scientific information on climate change is, as we have it now, the so-called sixth assessment report that will be finalized this year. And scientists are working tirelessly to gather all the information and do the necessary peer reviews and bring about that report very soon. And scientific work is indeed is being used in our process, at least, as an agent for change, how to change what we are experiencing and what we ought to do. In each of our program areas, we have 4 broad categories of program areas. One is adaptation, mitigation, means of implementation, and the last is actually very, very important, and that's also a central piece of the Paris Agreement, and that's transparency. Transparency in terms of transparently reporting on the actions and the commitments each country will make and put out there, that has to be transparent, that has to be credible, to bring the credibility, the trust in the process. So we have very elaborate processes to ensure that transparency that is reported. And moving on from that, it's also not just the countries and the governments, it's also, as I read out in the Article 12 of the Paris Agreement, it involves everybody. Not just countries, but private sector, foundations, civil society, individuals, all of us, that we all have to take appropriate actions within our capacities, within our reach, to do what needs to be done in terms of limiting those global greenhouse gas emissions. And that we refer to as inclusive multilateralism. And that is something that we strongly believe, practice, and promote, that this global challenge that we are facing cannot only be addressed or dealt by countries alone. All stakeholders need to come together and do what needs to be done in their respective capacities in a very holistic manner, and using science, again, as the basis for the action. And let me give you also some specific areas that many of the participants in this webinar may find it helpful and get involved in and engage with us. We have recently launched a new program for graduate students in the area of adaptation, the UN climate change, and the universities that partner with us to strengthen collaboration between United Nations and the universities, especially in Global South, to address the knowledge gap that remain as a critical barrier to countries implementing the adaptation measures, especially in Global South, especially in the low-lying islands in the Pacific and in other parts of the world. The second is we work with UN University, United Nations University, in a joint early career fellowship program that offers young people from developing countries to work at the interface between climate policy and research. So there are very many opportunities in that area. And finally, I'd also like to mention a very innovative and a creative platform that we have launched, which is referred to as Resilience Frontiers. That is, it's an interesting platform and very, very vibrant. It's to pushing the boundaries of everything that we are aware of in terms of addressing climate change and taking it to the next stage using artificial intelligence, supply chain management, and the Bitcoin technology and all of that. So really going way beyond the traditional norms of addressing these things in what is known tools and technologies, but going beyond that. And that is an interdisciplinary platform for creative minds, including from the academia, NGOs, youth networks, and interested communities, encouraging participation to stretch the boundaries of thinking on human sustainability. It approaches transformation in a holistic manner, taking account of the impact of frontier technologies, as we refer to, and key global challenges. And finally, let me conclude that I'd like to really encourage all of you not to be discouraged by the often highly bureaucratic structures or the narrative that we hear when we listen to the news in many parts of the world, just as we need to work on translating our work. And that is where the academia, the researchers, and universities come into play, is to bring that work at a level which is easier, simpler to understand by the common person. I find that extremely difficult sometimes, often coming out of the bureaucratic UN meetings, to walk out on the street or go into the cafeteria. And if anyone were to ask me, what did you discuss? It takes time to sort of understand that question and then translate that very heavy bureaucratic stuff that needs to be explained, and that we are not good at. And that's my call and request to all of you to engage with us and help convey the message of science, of technology, of the multilateral process in a way that can be resonated across in the society, especially to the young. And let me give you also an example. For instance, these days in the neighborhood, if somebody were to put solar panels on their roof, they're now calling it a solar envy. So the neighbors start looking at it and say, why not us? So it needs to be brought down to that simple, more effective and more forefront ways of doing it and understanding and explaining the phenomenon of addressing climate change. With that, I'd like to close and once again like to thank everybody for giving us this opportunity and welcome hopefully a good discussion. But I'd like to kind of apologize that I may have to leave a little early. I may not be able to participate in the Q&A session, but my colleague Angela, who's here, she will be more than happy to respond to any questions or take those questions, and then I'll get back to you, Peter, with written form of responses or further material and information that you will require. Thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sarmad, for that very illuminating talk. The opportunities you characterized, I imagine, will be very helpful to people. I'd like now to introduce our second speaker, Professor Jacques Dubochet, who is an Emeritus Professor of Biophysics at the University of Lausanne. He's a recipient of the 2017 Nobel Prize in Chemistry for the development of cryo-electron microscopy for the high-resolution structure determination of biomolecules in solution. He discovered a way to make the structure of biomolecules accessible to electron microscopy. In addition to his distinguished work in biophysics, Professor Dubochet is active in combating climate change and has been a forceful advocate of engagement to solve the enormous problems it has brought about. So without further ado, Professor Dubochet.
Professor Dubochet, I think you're still on mute.
Voilà, that's it. Yes. Well, you are young PhD laureate, you are young, you are working for your PhD, you are a young scientist, and you're prepared to make your life with science. The title of our event is Developing the Next Generation of Research Leaders for Sustainable Development. In fact, I don't like this title. Or I don't like not the title, but the idea of developing leaders. I think that what we need are not so much leaders, not at that level, but we need to have capable scientists and engaged citizen. That's what I hope you are becoming. And I come with a question. What is a scientist? I know a lot of people who would say it's an arrogant, ununderstandable guy who claimed to know it all. It's not completely wrong. There are such cases. I would like to hear your definition, but unfortunately we're short in time. I will give you mine. For me, a scientist is a person who has only one master and who learn only from one master, and this master is nature. And well, all I know as a scientist is what I learn from nature. Not quite true. Also, I learn from other people who has learned from nature. Well, the problem is that nature is large. Nature is very large. And my brain is small. How can I put nature in my head? And in fact, I must be modest. And I must accept that my capability to understand nature is very limited. Nature is much richer than what I can even imagine. Well, now we want to think about a program for development, for sustainable development. How are we going to do? Perhaps you can imagine, oh, all these stupid CO2 molecules going into our atmosphere and ruining our climate. I know we have to tell nature that nature bring them down again deep, deep, deep in the earth. That's not a research program. We don't tell to nature what she has to do. We learn from nature, we try to understand, and when we are there, this is research. When we are there a bit further, we can do it better. You see, sorry, I am coming to that. Yes, you see, the best time of my research time was when I was a scientist at EMBL, European Molecular Biology Laboratory. And the boss of this institute, newly formed institute, was John Kendrew, and he hired young scientists with the only thing he was asking is to have ambitious new ideas. And he gave us 5 years to do something out of it. And of course, the idea to be new, this means it was not, I am going to prove this or that. No, because this is not science. If you want to, well, it's good work, you can prove an idea. But the best thing in research is when you find something which is not expected. And in fact, the way is trying to find what you don't know, or even worse, that you have not even imagined. And that's exactly the piece of the enormous chance we had that you know, when you are an electron microscopist, you deal with biological material, and biological material is just water, or not just water, but a lot of water. And in the electron microscope, water evaporates. And therefore, electron microscopy is basically made with dry specimen. And the idea was we should freeze this water so that it doesn't evaporate in the electron microscope. But freezing is very bad for any things, so we didn't know what to do. And once we found that, no, you can cool water without freezing. And this was completely unexpected. And of course, the fact that it was not at all expected, then it was the open avenue in which we jumped, and many people jumped with us, and this brought us to this Nobel Prize. You see, that's the contrary of the program I had before with the CO2 molecules. Because if you work with want to have the CO2 molecule back down, that's very good. Everybody thinks about that. Therefore, the avenue will be super crowded, and you will be competing with 1,000 persons, and where can you bring your own idea? So if you want to be to be lucky with research, to be able to express your own capability in research, try to be innovative. Well, at EMBL, when we were appointed by Kendrew, he gave us a second hint. And the hint was an advice: collaborate. You have 5 years in front of you, and I tell you, if you collaborate intensively, you are multiplying your chance. That's right. Well, I have not been, I have been a fair collaborator, but I was in a time where every scientist was pushing for himself. And I was proud to be the first author, eventually the last author, because this is also very important. But this is not good. You see, now, and at the end I got a Nobel Prize for my name, and not from the name for the name of the group. The guy who made the final little movement which brought us this discovery is not part of the Nobel Prize. Yeah? So there is something wrong in this classical way of research, but it's changing now. I hope so, at least, because more and more, you can't believe that you have been the one who invented something. You have got it from other idea, you have mixed other thing. And so the idea that, well, knowledge is not you thing. And a basic idea is knowledge should be a common good, a good which it's belong to you as far as as for me. And this new idea is changing science. If I would start again science, I think I would be delighted to come into a new concept, the concept of open science. And open science means that nothing is mine. Everything belongs to everybody. And you see my famous, my notebook. My notebook should be under the camera, and it's not when I make a discovery that the discovery is published. Or anything I write on my notebook is public knowledge. This is the kind of research and the kind of science I would enjoy if I would be able to start again. Now, a remark, perhaps a remark which has been a bit far-stretched, but when I got the Nobel Prize in Stockholm, we had a press conference, a very big press conference, and the first question after each of us said a little small something, a journalist asked, well, I see here 11 males. And where are the women? Where are the females? And well, the answer I gave is up. Don't worry, they are coming. Yes, indeed, they are coming. We are coming in the time of open science. And what is destroying open science is this idea that this egotic tendency of males, sorry, but I think that is some kind of average difference between egotic males and female are perhaps a bit less egotic. And I hope that this new science will be less egotic and there is be much more space for female. Good luck. I guess among you, there are plenty of females. Good luck. Voila, I'm over.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Dubochet. Aoife, we probably have time for just a couple of questions.
Yes, absolutely. So a couple of questions that have come through through the function. I'll pose them both and then you can choose which you'd like to address. The first is that the IPCC determined in 2018 that the Paris Agreement, if followed, is projected to cap global warming to only 3 degrees in this century, but states that 1.5 degrees would already be problematic. How are these results used in negotiations? And how do we ensure that agreements include mitigations that are strong enough to follow the science? And then a second question, and probably the last one we'll have time for, is what lessons can be learned from the US withdrawal from the Paris Climate Treaty? How can we ensure that in the future, a unilateral step taken by one country does not jeopardize the goals of the treaty? Thank you.
As you know, as we all know, there are plenty of reasons to be very worried. So shall we look at what keeps us a bit optimistic? And the first thing is that people are not stupid at the end. And they learn from nature. We are all a very little bit scientists. And when we see what's going on in nature, slowly a lot of people learn. And the message is very, very clear. You know, in 1968, you know, that was the world revolution. I was part of it. So, and we were fighting between different political views, no chance to get unified. But now I see all my young people of the climate, the XR or the climate strike, they know where they go. They have a common goal. And this gives a force that that is unique. That's one thing. The second thing that is that even the old one, of course, in 10 years from now, I will be out, but we have children. There are the young people and you, PhD student, and so you are young. And you will not be able to say, soon I'm out. You are in, and you cannot do anything else than fighting. Fighting very, very hard for this common goal of saving our climate and saving the diversity and the richness of our life on Earth.
Thank you. If I can quickly reflect on those couple of questions in addition to what Professor Dubuche has said. On the first question with regard to what more measures can be taken or are being taken to bring the reduction in global emissions or limit the warming to 1.5 degrees, which is a goal of the Paris Agreement. One remaining piece of Paris Agreement that's still not being completely operationalized is something we refer to as Article 6, which is about carbon trading. And carbon trading and as a mitigation measure is extremely important. And to put a price on carbon. And that, we strongly believe, will bring about a transformational change. And we are working towards finalizing that last piece of the Paris Agreement operationalization this year. And that, we strongly believe, will have a very significant impact. And second is, IPCC also has, based on the scientific evidence, has also said that just by reducing the emissions is not going to get us to 1.5 degrees. We need to sequester. We need to remove the carbon from the atmosphere. So there we have seen now the carbon capture and other technologies that are emerging. Recently, Elon Musk has decided to award $100 million to the most effective carbon capture technology in the world. So we're seeing many more initiatives like that, and we believe those need to also be brought forward and complemented. And there again, the reason I mention all of that is for those participants who are in this webinar, this is a fantastic opportunity to dig deeper into those areas and see what research, education, and other opportunities there are that are available to take this discussion further and beyond the boundaries of what we are discussing. And the second question was how, in view of the United States leaving and rejoining the agreement, how do we prevent other countries from doing that? In fact, we had that discussion already at the time that Trump administration announced that they will be moving out of the Paris Agreement. What happened as a result of that was the engagement of cities, regions, private sector organizations, and the public stood up and went beyond what the governments had committed. So we believe that that is the way to go. We cannot, of course, limit any sovereign government to do what to do and what not to do, but we can create an environment. We can create a movement around this whole issue that would prevent that eventuality from happening. And we are very pleased to see that that decision that was taken by the US government has now been reversed, and there is a much stronger momentum. So we strongly feel that that is unlikely to happen going forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you both to our speakers for very illuminating presentations and answers to the questions. As background to the breakout workshops, I'd like very briefly to tell you about WUN's research agenda, what's distinctive about it, and the opportunities to engage with it, so that you can have these in mind as you get together for discussion. The key attribute that WUN can bring to the table is the diversity of its member universities. They're all major research universities that sit in very different geographical, cultural, and legal contexts that not only shape how they support research and deliver education, but also provide them with distinctive, varied perspectives on many important research problems. So WUN adds value because by capitalizing on the varied geographies and cultures of its members, it can assemble and support diverse teams of collaborators to tackle major research problems in fields where comparative analysis matters. We welcome your engagement in our programs. The network provides a wide conduit to interesting and sometimes surprising international research collaborations. Many of these address real-world problems and offer opportunities for researchers to deploy their disciplinary expertise in new ways. I'd like just to summarize very briefly how you might be able to come engaged. WUN's principal mechanism for supporting research is the Research Development Fund, known as the RDF. This is a small grants program to seed collaborative work that we hope leads to major continuing projects. Our website has pages covering current and previous projects. This is an annual competition. It opens in July and closes in October, and we take limited submissions per lead university, and the awards are made in December. The aim here is to support work under the large umbrella of sustainable development, currently with an emphasis on how our recovery from the pandemic can be harnessed to drive sustainable development. The particular fields of emphasis are informed by recommendations from 4 steering groups, so-called global challenge steering groups. We organize our activities under these 4 headings: understanding cultures, public health, responding to climate change, and global higher education and research. You can also become engaged by connecting directly with the Global Challenge steering groups, which, beyond the Research Development Fund, also organize workshops and larger collaborative projects within their domains. And to give you an idea of some of the opportunities within the domain of climate change, we've asked Professor Susan Governick, chair of the Responding to Climate Change Steering Group, to say a few words about the work of that group. Susan is Royal Academy of Engineering Chair in Emerging Technologies at the University of Southampton, where she's also Professor of Offshore Geotechnical Engineering and Deputy Director, Southampton Marine and Maritime Institute. She works in developing technologies and methodologies to characterize the engineering properties of the seabed and to advance geotechnical design of infrastructure that's founded on or in the seabed. Over to you, Susan.
Thank you very much, Peter. So I have one slide to share, if that is okay, Aoife. Can you see that?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, what an inspiring afternoon of presentations, and thank you for the opportunity to come and share a bit about the WUN Responding to Climate Change Global Challenge Group. You can see on this slide that we're called the RCC Global Challenge Group, but really it's important that we recognise that what we address is the catalyst, the causes and the consequences of climate change. And so we could be the RCCC Global Challenge Group, which is perhaps a bit of a mouthful, but it's important that we don't just focus our attentions on dealing with the inevitabilities of climate change, but also through climate action, reversing those trends. And so what I have to share with you today is really that our Responding to Climate Change group is a large group, one of the global challenge groups. We have representatives from nearly all of the 20+ WUN universities. And we have priorities around provision of clean food, clean energy, and human response and adaptation to climate change. And as a group, we have focused our attention on a particular project area for 2021. This is an opportunity for us to work together, but also to work across the other global challenge groups that Peter mentioned: public health, understanding cultures, and higher education. And so the Responding to Climate Change Global Challenge Group project for 2021 is regenerative by design, addressing climate change and reducing inequality. And we're quite early on in our project, but at the moment we are shaping this around assessing and finding solutions for the inequalities in energy access and how that is an enabler to all manner of essential activities in terms of food provision, agriculture, food preparation and cooking, health provision, and so on. And so this is really a call to action. We have heard about how we are, our Earth is our global commons. We need to have a global commons of knowledge as well. So this is a call to action that if you would like to become involved in the Responding to Climate Change Global Challenge project, you can certainly do that. So you can connect with the Secretariat, who will let you know who the Responding to Climate Change representative is from your university if you are part of it. Or they can just put you in touch with me, and we can create an ECR community to support this project alongside those formal members of the Responding to Climate Change Global Challenge Group. So if you feel that you would like to get involved, share your knowledge, and we can co-create some solutions, please do, connect with the Secretariat and they'll connect us on. Thanks, Aoife.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Very quickly before we move to the breakout, just a note about how to learn more about connecting with WUN research opportunities. This slide shows you the ways to go about it. Sign up with WUN Hub. That's a platform for WUN researchers to search and connect with colleagues. The hub contains descriptions of each WUN research project, and you can dig deeply into finding out about currently active ones and historically active ones. Also under the research tab, you can learn more about the Global Challenge Steering Groups. You can contact your local WUN coordinator. Each university has a coordinator who is on top of the various activities that are connected to WUN, and the coordinator will be able to help you pursue opportunities. And our Secretariat staff are also happy to answer questions that you might have. So please take advantage of us, engage with us as you explore the opportunities that we hope you'll discover in the breakout sessions.